Last month, Knicks owner James Dolan said he would honor my agreement and let Jackson finish his 5-year contract if he chooses, and not to meddle in any players' personnel affairs. So, yeah, James Dolan has basically told Phil Jackson to stay away from player personnel, affairs and anything to do with the players on the team. It's gotten that bad there in New York. And once again, Scottie never lied. Everything that he said is true. Once again, it's almost like you feel like that since Scottie played for Phil Jackson that he wouldn't say these things. I mean, he don't owe shit to Phil Jackson. He don't owe anything to Phil Jackson. And me being a Laker fan and saying, and I have to always give like the disclaimer, man, thank you to Phil Jackson for what he did in Los Angeles. Thank you. I mean, phenomenal. An incredible run. But Phil Jackson is a crook. Phil Jackson is a crook, man. I mean, period. It's as simple as that. Phil Jackson wanted, when they were talking about bringing him back to L.A., he was like, nah, if I come back, I'll come back, and I need to make like $50 gazillion, and I'm not going on no road trips. I'm going to stay in L.A. and eat wine, and me and Jeannie Buss are going to do and this, that, woo. And the Knicks basically bit on the Phil Jackson persona, hook, line, and sinker. Phil Jackson had no clue. He'd never been a GM before. Why did they think Phil Jackson was going to come in there and wave a wand and the New York Knicks were going to be a better basketball team? And they're trying to get rid of this guy, but he's got a lock-solid contract, and they can't get rid of him. They can get rid of him, but he's going to be on the beach somewhere in California, Laguna Beach, drinking Mai Tais and sipping on hottie toddies and all of that crap on the dime of the New York Knicks. So it's a bad, bad situation. I will say this, though, man. Phil Jackson and the New York Knicks, they deserve each other. They deserve each other. They deserve each other, man. I mean, the Knicks is a bottom dweller organization in basketball, has been for like 40 years. I don't know why everybody talks about the Knicks being, the mecca of basketball, this, that, and the other. Man, the Knicks ain't shit. And they ain't been shit for a long time, all right? And Phil Jackson coming there, hornswoggled him out of all of that damn money, man. It couldn't have been a better match made in heaven. Right. Ducking and dodging. Dolan give Phil an offer he couldn't refuse. 5 years, $60 million. 5 years is $60 million. I didn't really have a problem with it. I questioned it that they would give Phil Jackson that type of money, and he had never been a GM before. But I guess the whole thing is you wanted to associate your brand with a winning brand. The Phil Jackson brand is a winning brand. I mean, I'm not denying that, clearly. And all that he's done, 11 rings, 11 championships? The Phil Jackson brand is a big-time brand, but that doesn't mean Phil Jackson knows how to run an organization. And they do that a lot. Steve Kerr's been a GM, right out of basketball. Like, what qualifies Steve Kerr to be a GM? A lot of these cats are GMs. Michael Jordan, or not Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, a GM, to a large degree as well right now with the Charlotte Hornets. But before that, he was a GM. I think Jordan was a GM with the Washington Wizards. Larry Bird's been a GM for the Indiana Pacers. They've been average, slightly above average since he's been the GM there. Isaiah Thomas, as much as I love him, Zeke failed at being a GM of the New York Knicks. Magic Johnson's about to make a run at being a GM. So I guess you have the cachet of being a great player. People feel like that you're going to be a GM. That's going to translate to being a GM. Not so much. I mean, such is not the case. It really hasn't proven to be the case for the most part. So, hey, once again, it couldn't happen to a worse organization than the Knicks. From Corey in the chat room on Spreaker.com, he says, Phil was never the GM for those 11 rings, which is a very good point. Those 11 rings, he was the coach. He wasn't the GM. You know, I don't know if you could have, like if you offered Phil Jackson a job, if you're James Dolan, why wouldn't you do it on kind of like an option basis? Like year after year, you have an option whether you want to bring him back or not. Like, why'd you have to go on the hook for 5 years, $60 million with Phil Jackson? And he'd never been a GM before in his life. That seems like a bad business deal. The more I live, man, the more it amazes me how these quote-unquote great businessmen, you know, are great businessmen and how they're rich and they have billions of dollars and this, that, and the other. Like, Donald Trump is supposed to be known as this great businessman. Donald Trump ain't done shit to show that he's a great businessman since he's been a president. He can't negotiate deals. He's just a scrub. Donald Trump is supposed to be this great businessman. I haven't seen it yet. All right, now he's got, 3 years and 9 months more to prove that he's a great businessman or not. But thus far, I haven't seen the great businessman in Donald Trump. Same thing with Phil Jackson or James Dolan. James Dolan gave a guy that has never been a GM before, and this happens all the time in sports. I'm just thinking about it now because we're talking about Phil Jackson and the Knicks. But they give bad deals all the time in the NBA. For guys that you really have kind of some questions about, and you give them long-term deals, they do it all the time in the NFL. Like these rich owners all the time give bad deals. Like, why would James Dolan give Phil Jackson a 5-year deal for $60 million? Oh, yeah, and back up a little bit as well. He gave a long-term deal where Derek Fisher, I think, made like, I don't even want to guess the number, a ridiculous amount of millions to Derek Fisher, who had just took off his sneakers the year before to be the coach of the Knicks. Derek Fisher's still getting paid right now. He might not be the coach, but they gave him a long-term deal. And those deals in the NBA, they get paid. You know, they're basically guaranteed contracts. Like James Dolan, in a matter of a couple of years, gave Phil Jackson 5 years, $60 million. He'd never been a GM before. This is ridiculous. This is hilarious. And he also gave Derek Fisher, a guy that's never been an NBA coach, whatever amount of millions and years that he gave him guaranteed term on his contract as well. And that's a great businessman. Very, very interesting when you think about it, man, how these guys are supposed to be these big-time businessmen, and they give out bad deal after bad deal after bad deal. I would have gave Phil Jackson like a 1-year deal with a couple of with 4 years options for me. Right. What's the point? And here's the thing about it. What's the leverage that Phil Jackson has over the New York Knicks in that negotiation? You know, if you're the New York Knicks and you tell Phil Jackson, Phil, we want you to be our GM for the rest of your life. We want you to be the New York Knicks GM for the next 10 years, president and GM for the next 10 years. But you've never done it before. But here's what we'll do. We'll do a contract where it's 1 year at a time. Each year we have an option, and we'll give you $25 million. If that's the best offer that they give Phil Jackson, you think Phil Jackson's going to say, I'm not going to take $25 million for this year? No, he's going to take it. He's going to take it. But they locked themselves up for 5 years, just like the New York Knicks. From ducking and dodging, there's no salary cap on execs and coaches, so the money doesn't matter. No, the money does matter. I understand that. The money does matter if you have to continue to give it to a guy that's not producing. I'm talking about the term of the deal. Yeah. Once again, they didn't even have to give him $25 million. They could have gave Phil Jackson $50 million for a year. If they would have offered Phil Jackson $50 million for 1 year, do you think he would have turned it down? No, he would have taken it. Okay? And if he didn't do the job that they wanted and they fired him after that 1 year, in effect, they saved themselves, I don't know, $75 million if he's making $25 million a year. The 3 years extra on that 5-year deals are null and void. So, yeah, they may have given him $50 million for 1 year, but they saved themselves $75 million for the next 3 years. But they didn't. They owe that man his money, and they got to pay him his money. It's funny. From that ninja, are you going to criticize your Lakers for giving Luke Walton contract and he's failing and has no experience and he just took the sneakers off? You're exactly right. Luke Walton right now is failing. He is failing horribly. I don't have any disagreement with you on that, but he's young. The team is very young as well. So it's a slightly different situation in Los Angeles than compared to the New York Knicks, where they brought in all of these veterans, and Phil Jackson, they brought him in, and his record, and this, that, and the other. You know, slightly different. Luke Walton's never been a head coach before. Luke Walton's a relative new person as far as coaching in the NBA. Phil Jackson's got 11 rings. So it's a difference. Luke Walton is struggling right now. But the team is young as hell. So I don't want to sound like I'm bumping for him, but it's a much different situation, okay? It's a much different situation. I wish they would have gave Luke Walton a one-year deal, you know? Yeah, they need to figure out a way to do deals different in the NBA and sports in general. But in comparison to Phil Jackson, Luke Walton is not as bad as Phil Jackson. Phil Jackson should be embarrassed. He should be ashamed of himself. He should be ashamed of himself. The best thing Phil Jackson has done, and I don't even know if it's really he should take the responsibility for it, is for drafting Porzingis. You know, I got to go back and look at the draft and see if Porzingis just fell to them and where they drafted him at, you know. But that's probably going to be his long-lasting contribution to the New York Knicks. That's it. Porzingis is going to be a player. And he got drafted in the first round, 4th pick. I'd have to go back and look at the draft that year when they drafted him. So they got him with the 4th pick. But everything else he's done, horrible. Gave Carmelo that new contract, horrible. Brought in Joakim Noah, who's old and decrepit, horrible. Brought in Derrick Rose, a shell of himself, horrible. 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 Football talk coming up next. The Doug Stewart Show.
Direction, thoughts put down for perfection, for dead in minds, resurrection, for hard heads a lesson, towards the feeling, true confessions, daily movement, progression, handle minds with aggression, respect my essence not to get caught in intersections like a lethal weapon, or safety for protection, here today be here for tomorrow, granted like words and scriptures for you to follow, pay attention, not all man's have good intentions, likely to stay in one dimension, put in place with discretion, know you're rating this one, see how deep things get, pure elevation, set it off to cure a nation. Here today, be here for tomorrow. Granted like words and scriptures for you to follow. My man, here today, be here for tomorrow. Granted like words and scriptures for you to follow. My brah, here today, be here for tomorrow. Granted like words and scriptures for you to follow. My seed, here today, be here for tomorrow. Here today, be here for tomorrow. Cock this so it's balance the bullets. We all holding full clips. Ways of the world forever. Keep my peeps in bullshit. Drama that, another episode of the habitat. You see it ill and abstract. We live it real and that's that. Reality fact. See your brother lying on his back and another brother holding the gap. Cain and Abel had they beef a while back. Not for everything, niggas should react. Bodies dumped out on the floor like a Roots video. You gotta see the show, you not living like you want more. My brother is my keeper. Spray your block with street sweeper. Heard the code of the sleeper. Why you wanna live how wide for Grim Reaper? Live your life, get the thumping through your speaker. Only the few come around where the chosen run. You still have wits when I hold for bun. Of course I never think twice about busting. You only get spared one cousin. Here today, be here for tomorrow.